All I'm good for is attracting taken/married men. Now I'm having sex with one, and I'm giving up on finding actual love. First and foremost, I am not seeking sympathy. It requires two to engage, and I will never dispute that. Since I was a junior in high school, I have experienced both desired and undesired attention from men. Except for two individuals, these men were in committed relationships when they interacted with me. About a year ago, I emerged from a toxic and abusive relationship. I dedicated 6.5 years of my life to someone, and ultimately, he embarrassed me by ending things over the phone. When I initially got together with my ex, he was in a long-distance relationship. I had never had a boyfriend, never been kissed, etc. I was in college and embraced my independence a bit too eagerly. I began spending time with him, and because we were part of the same friend group and rarely alone, I did not think much of it. Then he confessed that he had feelings for me. My mother cautioned, "You should not get too close to someone who is in a relationship." To make a long story short, we had our first kiss while he was still involved with his partner. Even today, the guilt occasionally resurfaces. Before anything else could develop, I distanced myself and said, "Look, you need to sort things out. We can be friends, but that is all." He ended his relationship with her a few weeks later, and not even 2 days afterward, I was dating him. I was young, naive, and vulnerable. Initially, he treated me with respect, and we took our time. Then I began to notice that he would explode over minor issues. Throughout our entire relationship, his abuse toward me was primarily verbal and emotional. Only on 2 occasions did he resort to physical aggression. The pandemic caused us to become long-distance. Any attempts I made to discuss us moving in together and taking the next step in our relationship were met with excuses. Last March, he concluded our relationship over the phone, claiming he had made the decision for both of us. This is where Chase enters the picture. Chase is married and has been for several years now. I met him through mutual friends back in college, but amusingly, we had never exchanged more than 5 words with each other. We now hang out in the same social circle, playing video games and gathering with the group whenever possible. Almost all of my friends live in the same city, 2 hours away from me. It was well known that Chase and his then-girlfriend, now wife, practiced polyamory. There were a few occasions when they welcomed someone into their relationship. But then they got married and seemed to settle down. And before anyone inquires, no, they do not have children and are maintaining a child-free lifestyle. Upon reconnecting with Chase, it became apparent that we had much in common. Since most people in our friend group are comfortable discussing sex or sharing wild stories, I was not offended when Chase shared his experiences. I shared mine as well, even though my experience was limited to one person. Then we began conversing privately, exchanging memes and such. One conversation led to another, and I confessed to Chase, "If I had known you better back then, I would have been flattered for you to teach me new things." He admitted that his wife had given him a hall pass some time ago, but he was unsure if he would use it. Chase mentioned that he was quite content in his relationship. So I thought nothing of it and said, "Well, if your mind does change in the future, I would be honored to try something." He was also flattered, and we left it at that. However, I wrote this post for a reason. Apparently, after contemplating it, Chase has opted to use his hall pass with me. I know very little about polyamory, open relationships, etc. Chase possesses more experience, so I trusted him, and I still do. We began exchanging explicit messages in August, and we first had sex in November. He is an exceptional lover, and I have never met anyone else like him. We both agreed upfront to avoid getting emotionally involved. Furthermore, whatever occurred and continues to occur between us will remain confidential. Even his wife is unaware. Our friends have expressed suspicions, but we have denied everything. Chase acknowledges that he wishes he could have me every day. He has been thrilled to share experiences with me and is curious about the type of man I will meet in the future. To the best of my knowledge, we have one more encounter arranged. We will meet again when his wife is out of town for 2 or 3 days. Listen, I am not a good person. I needed to express this, not to boast or deny my faults, but to simply discuss it. I have been struggling mentally for a while, even before my involvement with Chase. My ex restricted me. My previous experiences have led to trust issues. I have missed opportunities to create positive memories, and while dealing with suicidal thoughts on and off, I think I have become indifferent. Terms like bitch, and whore are easy to throw around, even homewrecker. I do not care if Chase is merely using me for sex. I cherish our time together, but I am not in love with him. I do not want him to leave his wife, nor do I expect him to. Even if this is purely physical, it is exceedingly ironic that a married man with whom I am intimate has shown me the most kindness. Beyond the sexual aspect, he checks in on me and has supported me in several situations. Before things became intimate, he acted as a gentleman. He is the type of friend you would want by your side. All things considered, I have given up. I am just going through life like a zombie. If our friends discovered this, I would face significant backlash. Chase might be forgiven, but not me. He is the one who is married, but I am the one who is single. That may not make much sense, but oh well. Let us be honest, the other woman will always be criticized more than the husband. And I cannot help but wonder if there is a hall pass. Why am I kept a secret? Lastly, I have attempted the dating scene post-breakup. It is toxic. I genuinely made an effort. Men have ghosted me, or I simply do not see any potential. I posted about this elsewhere, and someone aptly described it as follows: Chase is the band-aid on a wound that requires stitches. I am only 26. Summary: I seem to attract taken or married men. My ex was one of them, and he ended up abusing me. Currently, I am in a sexual relationship with my married friend who possesses a hall pass. We have only one more encounter planned together. I'm aware this will come to an end eventually. I have sought out the guilt, but I am just numb. Ultimately, I feel I mentally gave up some time ago. Story 2. My boyfriend broke my phone out of anger. What now? I, F24, and my boyfriend, M24, were in a relationship for nearly 2 years. At the start of our relationship, when it was not yet official, he informed me that he and his ex-girlfriend had not been in contact for months, and he ended things with her because she cheated on him with his best friend. He evicted her from their apartment and never looked back. Hearing this was distressing because he was so kind to me, and I could not imagine him enduring such pain. 3 months into our relationship, I was using his laptop to work. I noticed his messages behind my tab, and even though I probably should not have, I looked. I discovered that he had been in contact with his ex 2 months into our relationship, but had ended that communication. However, he had claimed they had not spoken for months before we met. I also found out that he had cheated on her and that they were only broken up for a couple of weeks before we started dating. For several months before we met, I had been targeted in my direct messages by someone calling me despicable racist names, threatening me, and leaving unpleasant comments on my photos. I ignored it, assuming it was just a random troll, given my large following. It turned out to be her the entire time. I had never known what she looked like or her first name because, to be honest, I do not concern myself with my new partner's exes and do not want to hear about them. He sincerely apologized, blocked her, and told her to stop contacting me. She then had her sister and friends harass me online, but I blocked them. We managed to get through that, which is surprising, considering I usually leave relationships quickly when I feel trust is compromised. He was my favorite person, so I allowed a lot to slide. After being together for a year, we split up because he encountered tough times and I was covering all expenses. He had been living with me rent-free for 8 months, and I felt utterly drained. I was driving him everywhere since his car had been stolen. He told me that he felt abandoned and believed I did not care about him, which hurt because I would have done anything for him, but I felt like I was carrying him on my back for months. We were apart for 5 months. During that time, I went on a few dates but mainly focused on spending time with family and friends, as well as investing time into my business. He claimed he was doing the same. When we resumed contact, things felt normal again, but even better. He had secured a new job and a new car. We went on numerous dates. The love seemed even stronger. If that makes sense, I was happy and thought that our time apart was beneficial. I did something foolish again. I went through his phone, and what I found was terrible. I discovered that when we were separated, he had engaged in sexual relationships with some of my followers on Instagram. He had been intimate with his ex all summer while she was in a relationship with someone else. He contracted a sexually transmitted disease from her and feared he might have passed it on to me. However, he did not inform me because he was scared and preferred for me to tell him first. He was also sleeping with random women at bars, including strippers, and speaking negatively about me to all of them. This was incredibly painful because his ex had harassed me multiple times and had been racist towards me, yet he still returned to her. I ended the relationship due to the embarrassment over his ex and the situation with my follower. After our breakup, my ex unexpectedly called me after 2 years without contact. I was genuinely shocked. I answered, and we caught up on what we had been doing: business ventures, movies, food, shows, and travel. It was a heartwarming conversation, and it was nice hearing from him after so long. It was also refreshing to talk to someone who understood me and wanted to reconnect just to catch up, rather than merely to keep from losing me. You guessed it. My boyfriend and I rekindled our relationship. I felt so emotionally numb. I still loved him, but I was not particularly fond of him at that moment. Nevertheless, I thought I might be able to return to that feeling. He was overwhelming me with affection to make up for his previous actions, texting me constantly throughout the day, declaring his love regularly, and wanting to kiss me every time he looked at me. I went along with it, but I was aware he was overcompensating for what I discovered, attempting to make me feel cherished. However, that did not make me feel loved. It made me feel overwhelmed. He even proposed buying us a penthouse apartment so that I would not have to pay any bills. I declined because I did not want to depend on him or feel like my life was entirely under his control. His intentions were simply to make amends. We had been back together for a month, and I felt like I was living outside my body whenever he was present. I cannot fully articulate it. When my boyfriend's birthday approached, I took him on a vacation I had booked months earlier, which was non-refundable. The trip was enjoyable, but I regretted spending thousands of dollars on someone who would treat me that way. He had previously taken me on an extravagant trip for my birthday, so I wanted to reciprocate and make him feel special. My ex called me once a week for 30 minutes to catch up, and I entertained that, which was where I was entirely wrong. I had never done that before to anyone, communicate with someone behind my partner's back. We spoke about 3 times before we mutually agreed that we should stop talking, even if it was just as friends. My boyfriend went through my phone while I was in the shower and saw our conversation about not talking anymore. He destroyed my makeup, broke my alarm clock, threw my phone on the floor, and stomped on it until it shattered. It was my business phone, so I was devastated. He yelled at me, and I sat there in silence, unable to respond due to the shock. He called his friend and turned the camera on me while I was half dressed in my robe, and they laughed while he was shouting. I am usually apologetic when I am in the wrong, but I felt so numb and unsure of what he might do next. Ultimately, he left, sent me cryptic messages on WhatsApp, blocked me everywhere, and began following random women online. I'm not sure what my question is. I suppose I just want advice. I feel that he should be responsible for the things he damaged, especially considering how much money I have spent on him. I understand I was wrong, but it hurts knowing I invested so much in someone during challenging times and holidays, only for him to turn around and destroy my possessions. I am just uncertain how to proceed with this situation. Story 3. My 37F husband, 38M, cheated, and I'm truly lost on which path to take. Discard this because I do not want it connected to my main life. I require a space to articulate my feelings at the moment since there is no one I can confide in about this. I discovered he was unfaithful 3 months ago after I took it upon myself to look through his phone. Yes, I recognize I had no right to invade his privacy, but our relationship had suddenly changed. We had been facing some challenges regarding our schedules, and our family dynamics had been difficult for several months. Intimacy had vanished, and we simply were not getting along very well. I went through his messages after he returned home from work one day and learned that he had been involved with a coworker. Let me clarify, he had formed a relationship outside our marriage with this coworker. I was shocked and confronted him about it, and he immediately acknowledged it, expressing deep remorse and attempting to comfort me, but I was in a daze. She had been in my home, had sat on my furniture, and had shared dinner with us once. I was repulsed. I thought about disposing of the furniture entirely but opted to clean instead. I tidied up the house and rearranged everything while weeping. This had been a fear of mine since childhood. My parents never divorced but also never got along, which bewildered me as a child. Consequently, entering relationships became difficult for me. I abandoned many values I had upheld throughout my life. I married young, had children young, and truly became my worst nightmare, yet I believed it was all worthwhile because I had a loving husband and wonderful children. What I feared most in this situation was what would happen if we did get divorced. Would the children favor me or him? Not that I want them to take sides, but I always suspected I would be the strict one, and he would be the fun one, which would lead them to lean towards him. I do not want to speak negatively about him to our children, because my parents did that with me and my siblings, which never sat right with me as it created false narratives. I want my children to love and respect their father. I want to maintain his image in their eyes, but it is more difficult to accomplish with children aged 16 to 10. I struggle with therapy because whenever we discuss what he did, he tries to redirect the blame onto me and says, "I'm trying to take accountability, but you have to do so too." I feel foolish for having to turn to Reddit, as it rarely provides constructive advice for situations like this. However, I feel cornered. My relationship with my mother is strained due to various issues. My brother has a firm stance on these matters and often tells me simply to leave him. But that statement lacks substance, and my friends would echo the same sentiment. I have not divulged this to my family, not just because of the reasons mentioned above, but also due to my embarrassment. I grew up judging those in similar situations, believing the answer was straightforward, yet now I feel trapped, and I feel as though my very skin is suffocating me. He has been very remorseful, and I hate having to look at him because I can see the guilt and regret on his face, which only fuels my anger. I have seen others overcome similar situations, and I thought I possessed the emotional maturity to do the same, but I am genuinely having difficulty. He switched jobs, we relocated, and we adopted a dog. He has made numerous efforts to regain my forgiveness, but I remain uncertain. After the entire ordeal, I took a couple of weeks off work because I felt mentally paralyzed. I purchased a few Lego sets and started building them on my own over several days. I am intelligent. I have always considered myself smart, yet I do not feel that way right now. I feel stuck because I genuinely love him deeply. I believe it is possible to love someone while simultaneously disliking them, and that is precisely how I feel at this moment. What he did was profoundly wrong, and his approach to the situation exacerbates matters. We have addressed all of this in therapy. He talked about feeling isolated in our relationship because I often declined intimacy, as I have a demanding full-time job and am largely responsible for raising our 3 children, since he also has a highly demanding job requiring longer hours than mine. This weighs heavily on me, and I would appreciate it if he initiated more romantic gestures instead of just engaging in physical intimacy until I relent. I have discussed all of this in therapy, and while he is making an effort, every time we become intimate, I feel repulsed by the thought that he likely did the same with another woman. I read those messages and even shared them with our therapist. They are highly suggestive, discussing intimate moments they shared, things we have never experienced together. I have always been shy in bed and have rarely attempted new things, and whenever I suggested trying something new, he was indifferent. Now I understand it was because he was exploring those experiences with someone else. We discussed in therapy that he feels resentment toward me due to our different upbringings. I grew up in an upper-middle-class environment while he did not have the same advantages. He mentioned feeling the pressure to somewhat outdo my parents, which I understand. I have always tried to downplay my accomplishments to avoid making him feel inferior, and now he chooses to bring this up. He expressed feelings of jealousy regarding our children's closeness to me, noting that they tend to be kinder to me. We have 3 children, 1 daughter and 2 sons. One of our sons plays softball, and my husband sometimes practices with him, but it usually ends with them arguing because our son feels pressured. Again, I comprehend all of this, but he never raised these issues until he was unfaithful. I am intelligent, yet I presently feel like a complete fool, which is disheartening given that the person who should uplift me makes me feel this way. I long for this difficult phase to end as soon as possible. I want to love my husband without feeling like I am competing with someone else. I want to resolve this because I desire my children to have an involved father. If we were to divorce, he would not spend time with them. Without my intervention, he would likely miss out on everything. For the first time in my life, I feel as though everything is slipping through my fingers. My marriage is crumbling. My children are facing disciplinary issues at school for things they have never done before. and I genuinely feel like my life is disintegrating before my eyes. It feels as though I am experiencing a midlife crisis before reaching 40.